Welcome back, everyone. Today I've got a game where Stockfish shows how to convert an attack into an advantageous endgame and eventually a win. So get ready for another brilliant game of chess. Stockfish has the white pieces, and the game begins with e4 and c5, the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6, d4, the open Sicilian. C takes d4, knight takes d4 and knight f6 attacking the e4 pawn. Knight c3 defending, and now black has many options, the most popular being a6 entering the Najdorf Sicilian. Instead, Leela plays e6 going for a Scheveningen. This move is solid and leads to a variation called the Keres attack. Here Stockfish immediately starts the attack with g4. When black played e6, he blocked in the light square bishop, and this is what allows the immediate g4. Bishop e7 from Leela and g5 from the fish, attacking the knight. Stockfish will use the kingside space to restrict Leela's mobility, whilst Leela will try to move the pieces to the queenside for an attack. This is why Leela is comfortable retreating the knight to d7, as it will aid in a future queenside attack. h4 from Stockfish defending the g5 pawn, and knight c6 from Leela developing the knight. Bishop e3 developing the bishop, and a6 preparing b5 to develop the bishop and aid a future attack. Queen e2 from Stockfish, and this was the last book move. It is better to put the queen on d2 in the Sicilians. Short castles and long castles. Knight takes d4 from Leela. Black wants b5, but that would leave the c6 knight unprotected. That's why Leela trades first, and after white recaptures, then b5. A 3 from Stockfish preventing b4, and then queen a5 preparing b4. Here Stockfish moves the queen to d2, and if the queen was put on d2 originally, then the fish wouldn't have to waste a move moving it to e2, and then d2. The idea is that if black now goes b4, white will go knight a2, and the b4 pawn is pinned and white will win the pawn. Knight e5 from Leela threatening knight c3, forking the queen and bishop. Black is often happy to get rid of white's strong dark square bishop in these positions, and so Stockfish plays rook h3 preventing this knight c3 idea as well as defending the queenside. Rook b8 improving the rook and preparing b4 for the right moment. King b1 from the fish. This is always a useful move in Sicilians, getting of the diagonal and covering the infiltration points on the queenside. Knight c6 from Leela attacking the bishop and protecting the queen, which enables b4. We stated that white cannot give up his dark square bishop for the knight, so I ask you to pause the video to decide on what you would play to save the bishop. In this position, Stockfish saves the bishop by sacrificing it with the brilliant bishop f6. White doesn't mind trading dark square bishops, but giving up the bishop for the knight is wrong as it leaves black with a strong bishop pair. These type of sacrifices can occur in attack positions where one side puts a piece to be taken in order to open up the king. Here black cannot take the bishop as white will get a massive attack that will result in getting the material back along with much more. A lot of the time you have to ignore such sacrifices and continue your own attack. Leela continues with b4. Knight a2 no longer works as the queen is defended and the pawn is not pinned anymore. A takes b4, queen takes b4, and b3 defending against queen takes b2. Black now strikes with d5, trying to open up the position for his bishops and continue the attack. This is where Stockfish instructively changes the nature of the position. Instead of continuing with an unsound attack, it forms a plan of converting the position to an endgame advantage. Just watch how Stockfish trades off all the pieces, and then we can see the true idea. Stockfish first trades of the e7 bishop, and then brings the rook to the d file. Leela takes on e4, and Stockfish plays rook d8 trading off the rooks. Leela cannot take, and so it forces Stockfish to take its rook with knight c6. Stockfish trades rooks, and then plays queen d6 trading queens. Queen takes and rook takes, and now the rook attacks the c6 knight. Okay, now what was the point of all these trades? Stockfish was being attacked on the queen side. Leela brought the queen out and used its pawns to try and open up the white king. But in doing so, Leela created weaknesses like the a6 pawn and neglected the development of the light square bishop, which now suffers due to this move e6 that was played many moves ago. Leela is now forced to play bishop b7 protecting the knight, and now Stockfish uncorks the brilliant bishop takes a6, winning the a6 weakness. And now we see the final idea. Stockfish did all of this because it would have the two passed pawns in the end. In the middle game, Leela had the short-term, attacking and dynamic advantages, while Stockfish had the more long-term, endgame advantages. When this happens in a game, the side with the dynamic advantages or the attack wants to keep pieces on the board to grow the advantage, whilst the player with the static and long-term advantage like an extra pawn or better structure wants to trade pieces to exploit this advantage in the endgame. Stockfish negated Leela's attacking advantage and will now try and convert its endgame advantage. Leela cannot take this a6 bishop, as after rook takes knight, we see that the light square bishop cannot target the white kingside pawns. Leela therefore decides on king e7, attacking the rook, and Stockfish plays knight, takes e4, winning a pawn and adding to its static advantages. Bishop a8 from Leela threatening knight b4 to attack the bishop, knight, and rook. Rook d2 from Stockfish, retreating. Rook b4 from Leela attacking the knight and the pawn, and now knight c5 and rook takes h4. Yes, Leela wins the pawn back, but Stockfish's two passed pawns are still too strong. A 2-on-0 is better than a 2-on-4, and the two passed pawns are much quicker to advance. Rook d7 check from Stockfish, restricting the black king to the back rank and putting the rook on the 7th rank, the place where rooks always want to be. The rook now cuts off the black king and pressures the kingside pawns. King f8 and bishop b5 from white, attacking the knight and indirectly protecting the rook and preventing king e8. Knight d4, bishop a4, and bishop a1. This square is the best for the bishop as it's protected by the rook, which becomes very important a few moves from now. Rook c7 and knight c3 attacking the g5 pawn. Knight d7 check, king e7 and knight b6. Stockfish uses this knight maneuver to give the knight access to c4. King f8, rook c8 check, king e7, rook e8 check, king d6 and knight c4 check, and we see why the knight wanted to be on c4. King d5 and rook d8 check. Stockfish forces the king to the center and the king side in order to easily escort the passed pawns. Look how Stockfish managed to force Leela's pieces to the king side, where it's very difficult for them to stop the passed pawns. King e4, bishop c6 check, and king f4. King b2 and knight takes g5, winning the pawn and showing why the bishop needed to be protected on a1. Stockfish doesn't mind trading bishops, as knights find it very difficult to stop passed pawns, and in this game the knight really struggles to stop the connected passed pawns. Rook takes h1 and rook d7, putting the rook back on the 7th rank and tying down the black knight to the defense of the pawns. Knight e4, rook takes f7 check, and knight f6. b4 from the fish, and the pawns start rolling down the board. Rook d1 and rook takes g7. Another reason why Stockfish forced the black king out, as the rook can now feast on the black pawns. Rook d7 and rook g3. The fish needs to keep the rooks on to maintain winning chances. Trading rooks allows black to quickly mobilize the h-pawn. The rook needs to remain on the board to both help in promoting the pawns and protect against black's pawns. h5 from Leela and king b5 from the fish. Knight e4, rook h3 and rook d5. Knight e3 centralizing and putting the knight on a defended square while attacking the rook. Rook g5 and knight d1 heading for the d3 square, where the knight will help on all sides of the board. Rook g1, rook h4 check, king f3, knight b2, rook g5 and knight d3. The knight is now perfectly placed. It is defended. It defends f2, stops the e-pawn from moving, and covers the queen side by protecting the king and helping the pawns. Knight d2 check, king c3, king e4 check, king b2 and knight d6. c4 from the fish. e5 from Leela and king c3. e4, rook f4 check, king e2, knight c1 check, king e1 and rook f6. The black king is now stuck, unable to help his pawns advance and unable to prevent the white pawns from advancing. Knight c8, b5, h4 and rook h6. The rook plays a nice role of defending and helping the pawns go. King takes f2 and rook takes h4. White will have to give up the knight to stop the e-pawn and will then have to use the two passed pawns to win. Knight d6, king b4, Rook g1 attacking the knight and c5 with a counterattack. Knight b7 and rook h2 check. Stockfish does a small rook maneuver to get the rook to the best square. King f3, rook h3 check. King f2 and rook c3, defending the knight and helping the pawns. e3, c6, knight d6, b6, e2 and knight takes e2. Rook b1 check, rook b3, rook e1 and b7. The black knight did a horrific job of stopping the passed pawns. Knight f5, b8 queen, knight e3, queen g3 check. King takes e2 and rook takes e3 check with mate in 2 to follow. I hope you enjoyed this game and learn a bit about dynamic and static advantages and how to transform advantages into winning endgames. Please hit the like and subscribe button and then keep improving your chess. Now, go promote some pawns.